Okay, it's Gary Stratton with ARC TV, and we're here today with a local author here in Southwest Virginia. His name is J.C. Schweingrouber, and he writes suspense novels, comedy, horror, a little bit of everything actually. Some short stories he's working on right now I know of. He has several books to his name, but also goes under the pen name Cyrus Alderwood as well. So he has two different names, books out there under two different names. So again, we're going to talk to JC today about his writing and the books he has out there and what's coming up next. First off, Mr. Schweingrouber, when did you first start writing, and what was your first inspiration?
I started writing back in actually 2000. I was living in Cincinnati. I just had moved to Cincinnati in the year 2000. And at that point, for probably about a year, I was thinking about trying to write a book. Everybody always says they want to write a book before they die, and I thought, why am I waiting that long? Right? So I decided I wanted to write a book, and I was, thinking, bouncing some ideas around, and trying to find a genre I wanted to write in. And at the time, I was really enjoying a lot of horror movies that were coming out at the time. So I figured, that kind of genre would be easiest kind of get your feet wet with. So a friend of mine, I just moved to Cincinnati, and a friend of mine from here in Southwest Virginia as well. She was working in Cincinnati, and a friend I went to high school with. So she started to give me a tour around the city, and at that point we went through a place called Schweingrouber Cemetery, and this was on the I-75 side of the town. And at that point, I realized as we drove into this place, it was huge and it was immaculately beautiful. A little on the creepy side with some of the monuments that were up, marking graves and mausoleums. It looked very gothic, but at the same time it was so peaceful. We saw people jogging through the cemetery, and artists with their easels up painting and drawing, and writers writing, and so on and so forth. I actually saw a couple of sculptors, believe it or not, in there. And it was just one of these places where people kind of gravitated to because it was that peaceful, but yeah, it was inspirational. So as we were driving through this cemetery, I came up with the craziest idea for a book at that time about what if there was something living there? And I know it's kind of cliche, but something living amongst the cemetery that people didn't know, but maybe it had been there since the city was founded. Maybe I could tie it into the history somehow. So that was the initial thing that actually inspired me to write. And I went home that night and I was trying to think of a name for the bad guy, and I couldn't think of a name. I kept thinking about what I wanted the book to be about, and the storyline started kind of playing in my head like a movie, and I couldn't think of the name for the bad guy until I was driving back to Virginia to visit family here in Southwest Virginia, and stopped at a location in Kentucky called Slade. And I thought, well, that's kind of a creepy name. So anyway, the bad guy in my series, first horror series, was born, and the rest of it just kind of opened up like a movie in my head. So the inspiration came actually fairly easy once I went through Schweingrouber Cemetery, and I guess at that point I realized probably about 2 weeks later I was a writer, whether I liked it or not. So
fantastic. Well, tell us a little bit about your books, and what are you working on now?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the books I've written in the past. The one that I mentioned, Schweingrouber Cemetery, I wrote about. I wrote under my real name, John Schweingrouber. I wrote a 4-part horror series, and it was based on the concept of, you look around and all these different landmarks and locations that are really neat, they all have stories behind them. So I wrote a series called Legends and Landmarks, and it had 4 volumes, and the first was called The Nightwalker, and it was actually based off Schweingrouber Cemetery. And I brought a copy of it here, so I'm going to show the book cover. You can actually find this on Amazon.com. And it's about these 2 news reporters. They work for the City News, and they discover this age-old legend of evil as they started uncovering what was going on, the history of that cemetery. And as they come to find, some legends are true. So it goes from being a legend to being a life-altering experience for these 2 main characters that you follow throughout the series. The second book I wrote, it was Legends and Landmarks, Volume 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first one's called The Nightwalker, and that's where the character Slade, I'd mentioned, comes into play. The second out of the volume is called Freedom's Path, and that's loosely based off of the Missouri Compromise, and as slaves were trying to escape to the north, and some of the things, a legend there about this old bridge that crossed the Black River. The third one was called Demon Wind, and it takes place in New Orleans right after Katrina. Same 2 main characters traveling around trying to finish a book they were writing on these legends and landmarks. And the fourth one is called Devil's Cave takes part in the newer valley of Virginia, actually, Roanoke Valley, and finishes up back in Cincinnati. But it was one of these things where I kind of tied all these neat places I'd visited before and brought it back home, and then kind of wrapped it back up neatly in a 4-part series. And at that point, I wrapped those up. I was pretty excited to have what I thought was just be the one book I would ever write turned into 4. And then after that, I kind of going through a stage of nostalgia. I wrote a book called The Ultimate 80s. You know, you're a child of the 80s if, so I kind of harkened back on all the fads, fashions, movies, music, and culture, and all that stuff of the 1980s. It's just kind of, if somebody's interested in 80s trivia, it's probably something you want to pick up, and that's available on Amazon too on Kindle. After that, though, I kind of wandered around for a little bit and hadn't wrote anything in a while, and wanted to write something new. And if you know my last name, Schweingrouber, I don't know anybody that can spell that properly other than me, so it's hard to find on Amazon. So I decided I would change and actually use a pen name for not just you know, the purpose of easily being found, but you know, just to kind of separate myself from my day work as well. So I use the name Cyrus Alderwood, and if you want to find me on social media, you can find me under the name Cyrus Alderwood on Facebook, and by visiting me cyrusalderwood.com, and I'm on Twitter as well. Not very good at Twitter, but I'm on there anyway. I wrote a book called Pot of Gold, and this actually I worked on this with a local author too, coming up with the concept of you know, the storyline. James Hibbets is his name, and he has another book out as well. You might want to look him up, Secrets of Graveyard Hill. This particular book, I'll read the back of it here for you. This is a comedy book, and if you want to laugh every other page, this is probably one you want to check out. Jackson, a recently divorced and overworked 20-something, is informed that the father he never knew recently passed. So to honor his father's last wish, Jackson and his friends embark on a journey across the country to discover their own meaning of life as they try to dodge 2 bumbling mobsters hell-bent on burying them along the way. So these 2 guys, essentially, these 2 goofballs, find themselves in the wrong place, wrong time, and upset the wrong people for reasons they have no idea why, as they stumble across the country trying to you know, live up to Jackson's father's last wishes and kind of find out, so Jackson can find out who his dad was he really didn't know, and at the same time have a laugh a minute. It's one of these books, actually, when I sat down to write this, I'd never written comedy. I laughed the entire time I'm sitting there writing it. So I went back and read it since, and I've gotten good accolades from people who have read it. So if you like comedy, it's definitely one to check out. It's kind of like, I don't know, The Hangover meets American Pie, sort of. I don't know. But the next one I wrote was a combination of short stories. And I kind of went back to the horror theme, so I kind of wrote a book that was a cross between Stephen King meets The Twilight Zone. So it's called Bedtime Stories for the Terminally Afraid. So they're broken up so you can read little short stories and don't have to, you know, pick up where you left off in a story like you would a novel. And this is the cover of it. And it's one of those things, like I said, Stephen King kind of meets The Twilight Zone. I couldn't decide if you read these things, if it gives you a case of the heebie-jeebies or the willies. Either way, if it makes you a little nervous, I did my job with some of these. One of the things I pride myself on when writing is I don't want you to be able to guess at the ending. So some of these short stories, when you read them and you think you know what's going to happen, you probably don't. So it's one of those edgier type stories, and they all seem to have a purpose too. Like one of the themes of anything I write, I like to have a meaning to it. So Pot of Gold, for example, even though it's slapstick funny, it's the main character. You kind of feel for that guy because, the 3 main characters, 2 guys and a girl, that you know, it's that place where you lose yourself and you find yourself at the same time. So there is a little bit of a philosophical point to the story. So I like to have something that's kind of like an underlying theme that you really relate to some of these people. Now the next one I wrote has one of the weirdest titles that that you're probably ever going to see. And don't judge a book by its cover, they say. This is about a guy by the name of Eddie Duchesne. Now if you think about that last name, Duchesne, and you're in high school with that name, you can probably imagine what kind of nicknames you get, right? So this one's called A Man Called Douche. And this is probably the last chivalrous guy in the world. His wife's 3 months pregnant, and Eddie doesn't want her to take a second job, but in this crazy world we live in, the guy lost his health insurance at work, and it's going to cost him twice as much to get the same plan. So what does Eddie do? Even though he works his butt off all day long, he takes a second job, not just any job. Eddie decides if he's going to take a second job and get paid for it, he wants to do something he's always wanted to do in his life, right? So Eddie decides to join the Tampa Professional Wrestling Alliance. And at that point, he has to train, and it's about this poor guy trying to get along with people he has nothing in common with, trying to train to be a pro wrestler, acting a fool. But his wife, fortunately, comes in to help him out by trying to make him I guess, some bit of a local celebrity before he even gets hired by this group while he's training, so that people are expecting to see this guy, a band called Douche, show up with his 2 ringside escorts that are probably more popular than him. That's why they actually show up, probably to see the escorts. But anyway, again, a funny book. It's, again, it kind of has a little philosophical purpose through it about never giving up and persevering even when things look at its worst. And but at the same time, makes you laugh about every other page anyway. And what I'm working on now, I've got another comedy bringing out this fall. It's called Tales from the Sunset Pub, and it's just a collection of stories from when I lived in Cincinnati between the years of 2002 and 2006. I used to go to this little pub a friend of mine owned, and it was just 2 blocks over from where I lived at. All the neighbors went there. We hung out, played darts, part of a dart league, a citywide dart league. I played for my buddy's bar. And I guess I made up some crazy stories based off some of the characters that I met in this bar. Again, it's completely fictional. And if they're watching, if your life is anything like one of these guys, you probably need professional help. But again, work of fiction, but it's slapstick comedy all the way through it, with some stories that you just probably couldn't believe people could actually get into. But if you hang around a bar enough, you'll find out they probably do. But that's what I'm working on now, as well as yes, a few other edgier things I'm working on the side as well.
I know you mentioned one thing. You recently established an LLC as part of your long-term goals in writing and entertainment. What's that all about?
Yeah, was a friend of mine I co-write some things with, some edgier type of material. We set up an LLC called Anarchy Creations Inc. INK, not INC. And we have a website, you can find us on there as well. One of the things we set that up for is that we wanted to use a company, and not just ourselves, for networking purposes, and to find other artists out there that we can kind of connect with and kind of have the same vision of material they want to write. We're actually branching off into some different things. Screenwriting, writing movie scripts, that's one thing I've been doing as well, so getting some of those in the queue. And hopefully we'll be able to use the company to push some of these types of things in the future, not just with for what I'm doing, but maybe some of the other artists that we reach out with, we can collaborate with that are out there. We're actually branching out into graphic art novels too, so we're writing scripts of using the paneling type method of writing, where we do need to meet some graphic artists that can actually do the drawing and the penciling for us. But we've got some very edgy stories we're working on, and some interesting contacts we've made, not just locally, but as far up as New Jersey and New York, and as far out as LA. So we've got some people that we're kind of working with, working with, to maybe bring some things out in the future that you never know. They may go somewhere, they may not, but only one way to find out, right? And that's to step up, play, take swing. So we're doing some very different things like that. And with the company, we also wanted to maybe try to do some promo work, kind of get into that work and promote other artists. And we've been using social media and the web to promote some people that we've kind of connected with. One we've actually did some promo work online for on social media is an independent filmmaker that we got to know by the name of Mike Maney. And he made a movie called Dusk. It was an incredible movie. It was a low-budget stuff, but the storyline was just kind of blew us away. So we wanted to maybe kind of work a little bit, getting our feet wet, doing some online promo for Dusk, and hopefully kind of move him along a little bit too, as someone that we might want to work with down the road with some of the projects that we're putting in the hopper. So we're going to get a handful of projects in the hopper between now and spring, and then make additional contacts and do some travel and see what we can kind of pitch. So getting into the graphic art novels is something totally new to me, and but it's anything, learning something new is always a good thing. If you're a writer, trying to branch out and do some different things. Not only do I write comedy and horror, but I've been branching out in some dramatic writing here recently too. So another book I've got planned for the future, but I'm not sure when it'll come out. It's a dramatic piece called Southern Rain, and That's that one's probably a storyline that's more personal to me. Of some of the things I've experienced personally. So sometimes I guess you do have to write what impacts you and kind of make it personal with the reader instead of just finding you're scary all the time. So, yeah, if you get an opportunity, any of these books, I'd certainly I'd love for you to check them out. They're all on Kindle, and they're $2.99 or less if you have a Kindle or a Nook or an e-reader. They're available for all of them. Even I think the Apple Store has them as well. If you want one in print, don't have them in print except when I go for book signings or festivals. But I do keep these handy, so as you can see, I keep plenty of them handy. Contact me through my website, or contact me through Facebook if you like a print copy, an autographed copy, and usually $10 plus postage, and I'll send them right out to you. But again, certainly appreciate those who have read them, and hopefully, if you liked one, you'll like another and pick another one up. So yeah, I do invite you to check out what I'm working on.
Very good, and of course, one of the things we like to do is help out young people get into the writing in this case. What are some of the challenges of being an independent writer, and what advice would you give someone wanting to write their first book?
Yeah, and some of the challenges of an independent writer is, man, it's interesting. It's not easy. If you don't have a company behind you putting money out there and getting your book in Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or on bookshelves, it's tough. No one really hears of you. Self-promotion and marketing is the hardest thing to do. I must admit that that's probably my weakest point is self-promotion and marketing, even though I feel like I'm constantly doing it a lot. So that's kind of the tough thing. Getting into trying to find a storyline sometimes when you're brain dead, but you want to write. But yeah, so that's another challenge. And finding venues to host is not too tough of a challenge, but once getting into a venue to do a book signing, trying to get people interested in coming over and talking to you. I mean, you got a lot of writers are very introverted people. Unfortunately, I'm not. I've got the gift of gab, so I'm always up talking to people and trying to at least give them a bookmarker with my website on it so they can check something out. But yeah, definitely one of the biggest questions I get when I go to book signings, I get approached a lot by people who've never written a book that want to write a book, and how do they go about doing it? And they've went out and bought a book that outlines how you're supposed to write a book, and I've only read a couple of books in my life about how to write a book that was actually worth the money you spend. One of them is called On Writing by Stephen King. That one's worth spending the bucks on. Most other stuff you're going to find is going to tell you about rules of writing, this, that, and the other. There are no rules to writing except the rules that you put on yourself when you start writing. Obviously you want to make sure you have correct your spelling and things like that readers notice. But write for yourself and write in whatever way you're comfortable with. That's one of the first things I would tell people. Don't expect a formula. Some people can sit down and just write off the top of their head and shoot from the hip. Other people need to sit down and write out an outline chapter by chapter. I've done both. But you have to do whatever works for you. Sometimes writing a book calls for having a summary so you keep on track. Sometimes they're so sporadic, like Pot of Gold. All I needed was a chair and a keyboard, and I was good to go. And it just poured out of my head. So there are a lot of different ways that you can publish. You can publish through Amazon Kindle. You can self-publish through there. You can go to other self-publishing places and get print copies. Smashwords.com is a good place if you've written a book and you have a cover and you want to upload it for everybody to be able to buy and see. That's a good venue as well. But I guess one of the things I would tell you, if you're thinking about writing a book and you kind of don't know where to start, because it's easier said than done, if you have a local authors guild, reach out and touch base with these folks. I'm a member of the Appalachian Authors Guild, and actually I'm an officer, a vice president of that organization here locally. And we have, every other month we have a meeting where we can just, the board of directors and officers meet. But we open them up to the public, because one of the things we want to do, you're going to find a lot of these local writers. If you're part of even if you haven't written a book, you want to join a guild, you can do it. They are so helpful to people. We have one of the things I like to do with the guild when we have people that come in. We'll do little writing exercises. So if you're not sure how to get your creative juices flowing, don't know where to start, I'll give you some writing prompts and give you 15 minutes to jot down whatever you're thinking about. And it doesn't have to be a story. You just jot down whatever you're thinking about, as long as it gets your mind working. For example, if you're watching this and you're interested in writing a book, I want you to ask yourself, find one of your favorite books and one of your favorite characters from that book. And if that character were going to write you a letter, what would they say to you? So that's one thing you can kind of think about. That'll get you thinking. Or imagine you're on an airplane and you're going overseas, and you're sitting next to somebody and they strike up a conversation. They want to know who you are and what you do. Well, maybe you've always wanted to be somebody else. Maybe you want to be a super spy, or maybe you wanted to be a movie agent. Or if you can make up anything to tell that person about who you are, what would you tell them? Your alter ego stuff. So I mean, there are a lot of different writing prompts you can do. So we try to have exercises like this where we kind of walk people through different things at some of the meetings and kind of get the creative juices flowing. And we're always, those folks that show up are just incredibly helpful to new writers. So think about doing something like that. If you have any questions about any of that stuff, you can always contact me through my website, cyrusalderwood.com. I put my email address up there, or on Facebook, and if you're interested in finding out how to contact a local guild, just touch base with me and I'll point you in whatever direction I can. But the important thing is to sit down, think, and you got a keyboard there, just beat on that keyboard until whatever you're thinking and feeling comes out.
What if you have that, what we call writer's block? Is that an issue for you ever in the past, and what do you do about it?
No, I haven't had writer's block per se, because when one idea starts going away, another one pops up and I start working on it. Now, writer's block in the sense that prime example, I was recently working on a book that's about a guy going through a midlife crisis. He's just divorced, and all these antics he gets thrown into by his neighbor's wives fixing him up on blind dates. And so that was kind of funny, but about halfway through the book, I just wasn't feeling the book at that point, so I moved on to Tales from the Sunset Pub, which will be coming out soon. So that happens. I don't know if I exactly call that writer's block, but this is sad to say, but I probably have more books that I've started and stopped in the middle of than I have friends. So there's quite a few other things out there that I've been working on, just kind of lost focus in the middle of, and you just don't feel the story anymore. So that's why it's important when you feel a story, you better sit down and write on it. But and again, writing prompts like we practice at our meetings with the Authors Guild is another great way just to get started. If you can't think of something, just we'll think of something else crazy and we'll write about it and see where it goes from there. I mean, even as something as simple as whatever room you're in right now watching this, just look around the room and find something that doesn't fit, that doesn't belong. Why doesn't it belong? Is there a mystery behind that? Or maybe it belonged to a relative, or that bookcase doesn't look right there. Is there wait a minute, there's a trap door underneath. Where does that go to? So anything at all, just to move your imagination is a good way to fight writer's block. But that's about as much of a writer's block as I've had, because I'll pick up a book that just has maybe writing prompts in it, and I'll just flip to a random page and start thinking about whatever that question is.
Very good. That's good advice. Okay, kind of wrap things up. Where can people find your books? As you mentioned that before, but tell us that again, and how to contact you, and what's coming up next.
Yeah, if you have an e-reader, cheapest way to buy a book. Like I said, I have these. If you contact me directly in my email, you can visit me at cyrusalderwood.com and contact me, and you can buy one for $10 plus postage, which I think is like only $3 or something like that, so about $13. Or you can buy them on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any of the major retailers, online retailers, for your e-readers for $2.99 or less. One thing I will toss out there, I did do a couple of short stories I did put out there individually for free, so that readers that aren't familiar with anything I've written, if they don't want to, it's only $2.99, you spend more than that on coffee, but if you want to download a free short story and read and kind of get an idea of what I write, and even though it's very diverse, but if you just want to kind of get a sample, there's a couple things out there you can download for free. But Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, the Apple iStore, you can find it on all those for your e-readers. Or like I said, contact me through my website, cyrusalderwood.com, or find me on Facebook or Twitter. I love getting feedback when people read a book and they tell me, hey, I just laughed my butt off at something. Makes my day. So, hopefully you'll pick one up. Hopefully you'll like it, and make you want to maybe read a little bit more. But as a local author, it's kind of one of these things I wear as a banner of pride, as a badge of pride, that I get an opportunity to write and showcase this to people I know, family, friends, and even from the funny stuff to the edgier stuff that it's not Harry Potter stuff, so you don't want to give it to your 12-year-old, but it's like I said, some of the scarier stuff is like Stephen King meets Twilight Zone, and some of these are a little bit more of like the the Hangover kind of style of comedy. But take an opportunity, pick something up, give one of our local authors a try, and check out the Authors Guild as well. You'll find a lot of great local authors that write a lot of different good things that are excellent quality.
Well, thank you very much. We've been talking to J.C. Schweingrouber, also pen name Cyrus Alderwood today. He's from Southwest Virginia. He has several novels that you know where to pick them up at and find them. Hope you can read them, and we'll be checking in with you later on what's coming up next.
All right. Thanks so much, and thanks for watching.
Thank you. This has been ARC TV.